Welcome everyone to the Friday afternoon live webinar. If you're watching this afterwards, please join us on Fridays. During the standard time zone, we are at 1:30 p.m. Pacific time, and during daylight savings, we are at 2:30 Pacific time. So join us live if you can. The links are all on seekingintegrity.com. I'm traveling, so my lighting is worse than usual, but I'm here with Debbie McRae. She always brings so much content. I was just sharing that I probably refer people, partners in particular, to her resources, the previously recorded webinars multiple times, probably multiple times a day. She has a work group starting on the 11th, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, for healthy boundaries. And a work group is not therapy. It is not treatment. Many therapists recommend this for their, and we have sex addiction 101, et cetera. But these are supplemental to the work that you would be doing with your therapist. But I, I, I love Debbie's perspective on this and help, because having internal boundaries, like partners have been told that their boundaries are not real or aren't necessary, or they shouldn't have them. And so learning to reclaim that and what a boundary is and isn't. I was just talking to somebody, and the partner's boundaries were control and punishment. It wasn't helpful to either party. So it's finding the space that's going to be helpful for each of you, even if it's the addict partners bumping up against your boundaries. Yeah, that's what needs to start happening. So okay. So, Debbie, what do you have for us today?
Well, today we are going to talk about what creates disconnection in a couple that are in recovery. And
Ooh,
I've narrowed it down to two different things. So we're going to explore the role of the actual trauma brain and the mind states that the betrayed partner experiences that are drivers of disconnection. And then, secondly, we're going to talk about the role of the addict partner shame and how it is also a driver of disconnection. And we're going to talk about how they work together. And then I'm going to talk about some intentional recovery tools after we go through these two different types of disconnection. So here's what typically shows up in my office. I will have a couple come in, and the betrayed partner will report that they were triggered by something. And as a result of that trigger, maybe it's something they saw or something they heard the betraying partner say, or maybe it was just intrusive thoughts. And their brain starts to take them again from prefrontal cortex, that executive functioning part of our brain, and it moves them back into that limbic area, that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And as they go into feeling unsafe, then they might go into safety seeking, or they're going to go to their betraying partner and ask for more safety. And in that process, the betraying partner becomes triggered. And the betrayed partner might become defensive as a result of shame coming up. So now we've got the betrayed partner who's got her trauma brain in gear, and then we've got the betraying partner who is now in their shame. And so I will hear them talk about in session the stories they have about each other. So for the betraying partner, it might be, I'm not supported. I feel like I'll never get it right. No matter how much recovery work I do, she just doesn't see it or recognize it. And for the betrayed partner, it's going to be things like, he's not safe. Yeah, I see him doing recovery, but I still don't trust that he's really, really in recovery and it won't happen again. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust him. So we've got that going. And what happens then is, with the betraying partner in their shame and the addict partner in her trauma brain, which leads to some mind states or some certain types of thinking, then we get caught in that loop and there's that disconnection. So let's talk for a little bit about what causes the partner to disconnect. Well, simply put, it's a brain response due to a trigger, which is the brain's way of moving you into a state when there's a perceived threat to create safety for yourself. So with that happening, the limbic system gets activated, the amygdala starts firing, and then what the brain does is the brain will go back into an area of the brain called the hippocampus by the amygdala, and it will start to look at everything from the past. And it filters the here and now through what you've experienced in the past. So for a betrayed partner who may have had many disclosures or many discoveries, or who has experienced many opportunities in their recovery where they haven't felt safe, then their brain's going to remind them of that. And so they're going to go into a hypervigilant state, which means all of the systems in their body are going to become activated. Heart rate's going to increase, breathing's going to increase. They're going to feel rushes of adrenaline and epinephrine. And so the body now is going to also then move into a state of high alert. They're noticing every little thing. They might end up with intrusive images. They might have ruminating thoughts. And of course, there's all sorts of really intense emotions. There's changes to the physical body, especially in sleep and appetite. And it's like the betrayed partner's body has an alarm that just won't turn off. And it's not that they're broken and they're doing anything wrong, because this is something you have no control over. It's really your brain doing its job of keeping you safe. The problem is the alarm stays on all the time, even when it doesn't need to be on. So the brain is going to move you into that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. So for example, when a betrayed partner goes into a fight response, that's when they might move into, I'm going to seek safety from you by really grilling you about what you are doing for recovery. Or they might argue, or what I call, they might fight for connection. They might want information. There might be demands to see your phone. So they move into this state of high alert, right? With intensity, there might be a lot of anxiety involved with it as well. They might also move into flight. With this, you'll see the betrayed partner withdrawing. They might keep themselves super busy. I talked to a client this week where we identified that them keeping busy and making sure they did something from the moment they woke up in the morning until they went to bed at night, that they were overworking as a way of moving into a flight response because it kept them away from the betraying partner. You might also even move into numbing on screens. I think that's a form of flight. I can go into a different world and kind of separate myself. You can also move into freeze. Freeze is kind of a shutdown response. It's like the body goes, I am so overworked and overwhelmed that I'm now going to go into this place where I might dissociate. And again, we can see dissociation occur with the betrayed partner being on things like their devices for long periods of times. It might be you don't have a lot of energy. Some betrayed partners say they just can't get out of bed. They might have a difficult time making decisions. And then the last one is fawn. So this is where the betrayed partner moves into behaviors of pleasing and appeasing, over-explaining, even caretaking the betraying partner just to keep the peace. And keep in mind that all four of these are protection strategies. These are nervous system responses. So what's going on in the brain is the brain is wired to notice what's wrong more than what's going well. So it can really lock us into looking at life through the what's wrong lens, and it's going to start to strengthen any stories that are associated with that limbic response. So when betrayal happens, the body and the brain treat it like it's a serious safety threat. So like I mentioned, that internal alarm is cranked up. It is constantly scanning for danger and it's ready to defend. This becomes an ongoing state for the betrayed partner. And they cannot let their guard down. In fact, if they have let their guard down in the past and then something bad happens, from that point on, their brain and their body is telling them, you can't relax. You've got to stay on total watch. And that threat center just stays on. So the nervous system, when this is happening and when it's in a threat-oriented state, we're also going to have thoughts that start to form around it. And one of those thoughts is that you begin to see the betraying partner as that source of harm. And so some of the things that you tell yourself, and a lot of this is unconscious until you're aware of it, is my partner isn't safe, my partner is a bad person, my partner's not in recovery. And the brain starts to more and more stay stuck in that danger first state. So it's going to even read the most simple cues, really ambiguous cues that the betraying partner might be giving the betrayed partner as potential warning signs. So when we have this mind state, it's the brain actively looking for and interpreting events as threatening, even when there may not be any threat at all. So again, the brain's in these stories, it's getting us prepared for when we're going to get hurt again or when we're going to take the next big hit. The problem is when we've got this limbic response and we've got our thoughts going like that, betrayed partners get stuck in their trauma symptoms and they feel like there's no way out. And what occurs then is they have repeated triggers and they have repeated activation of their system. And so we want to be aware of what are some of the ways that that mind state shows up. So I'm going to give you just a few examples of the mind state. And the first one is that the betrayed partner's mind might see reality and they understand what's going on, but they don't want to see it. They push it away. So this would be where the partner's seeing her betraying partner really working on their sobriety, they're doing good relational recovery, but they won't believe it. They just don't see it as really good recovery. And a lot of that's because there's fear that you're going to be hurt again, because what if you get your hopes up that they're really in recovery this time and it doesn't happen? Another mind state that happens is there's some denial. You know, you're aware of your reality, but you don't want to accept it. So a couple of ways this shows up with the betrayed partners is they know that they need to do self-care. They know that unfortunately, because of what's happened to them, they have to be very active in their own recovery. And instead of focusing on their own recovery, oftentimes they will focus on the recovery of the betraying partners. So they know they need to do their own work, but instead of doing it, they're going to focus on the betraying partner. Another thing I see is the betraying partner sees that their addict partner isn't fully engaged in recovery, and they have a hard time accepting that they could or they should put boundaries in place to create safety for themselves, even if those boundaries mean that it's going to cause a disruption to the attachment, the little attachment they have in the relationship. So that's very, very difficult. We also have a judgmental mind state. So this is where you have critical thoughts about yourself and critical thoughts about your betraying partner. And so when we are in that critical state, we are not able to move into a space of self-acceptance. So how this shows up for the betrayed partner is they're going to hold on to these negative beliefs that they have about their partner and their partner's addiction and out of control sexual behaviors. And oftentimes they will then judge themselves as being the reason why this occurred because they're not good enough. Or they might see the betraying partner as not good enough and not doing their recovery very well. So when we have those types of mind state themes, what's going to happen is we're going to move into our stories. And these stories are so unconscious. So one of the first things that a betrayed partner needs to be aware of after we get you regulated is to work on those stories. So like I said, we need to work with the nervous system and the mind state. So the first step is help your body regulate. Get out of that alarm system state. And so with that, we're going to start focusing on your safety first. So with this, you've got to create routines and rituals like I've talked about so often. So that means you've got to have routines for sleep, routines for when you eat, routines for when you move your body, routines for when you're working on your recovery work. Maybe it's reading or listening to a podcast. It's important that you get support so you have others who can help you co-regulate. So I often talk about my circle of 5 or 6 that were there to help me with those times when I was dysregulated and I was in an emotional state. And with that, then I had somebody to step in and help me co-regulate, whether it was somebody who was a sounding board and could give me good, logical, healthy advice, or it was somebody that I could just cry with, or it was a group of women that I could learn about betrayal with and turn to them when I was struggling. Really, really important. Then you need to have your own little toolkit of emotional regulation skills that help you regulate, and everybody's system is different. We want to get your brain back online, meaning connected to prefrontal cortex, to that front part of the brain. And so one of the best ways to do that for anybody is to do some type of bilateral movement. So what do I mean by bilateral movement? I mean any movement where you're moving back and forth, whether it's walking or it's biking, that I am moving back and forth, or it's cross-body tapping and doing some breathing. That's going to help your body use up the cortisol that is getting distributed throughout your body as a result of that emotional dysregulation. Another thing that's really important is to figure out which breathing practices work for you. So important that you know whether or not it's box breathing or it's circle breathing or it is, the 4-7-8 breathing. It's important that you have some type of breathing that helps you regulate. I also like emotional freedom technique, which is tapping and learning how to say out loud what it is you're experiencing in the moment while you're tapping on meridian points in the body that causes the body to respond and calm down. I often tell my groups and my clients that one of my favorite studies on this tapping was done, and what it showed when they did SPECT scans on the brain of those before they tapped and after they tapped was that after they did this tapping, there was a down regulation or less activity in the limbic region of the brain and more activity in the prefrontal cortex. So it works. Another thing I talk about with betrayed partners is to have a really good internal boundary called taking the pause. So when you're emotionally dysregulated, your brain's offline, then you have to step back and you have to do some type of self-care. So slowing it down, because it's going to take the brain 15 to 20 minutes for you to regulate and then reconnect once you're offline and to get back into that area of your brain, into the prefrontal cortex. You can also do some type of nervous system resets. I often tell my clients to go put ice packs on their necks or go jump into a cold pool or to get in a shower and turn off all the hot water and let it hit your neck so your vagus nerve runs through here. And when we stimulate it, what it causes the body to do is it causes the parasympathetic nervous system to kick in. And that's the calming part of our nervous system. And then the next thing you've got to do is you've got to notice the stories your mind keeps telling you, and you've got to reshape those stories. So you've got to identify the story. So I love using the script. The story I'm telling myself right now is, and once I identify it, then I love to do my thought stopping technique, which is tapping the sides of your head and saying stop it, 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 stop it 7 times, and then reframing the narrative. That story is not completely true. What is true is, and then I like to move into a mindfulness statement or a self-compassion statement. So that might be, I remind myself that my brain is trying to keep me safe, but I also have other choices rather than staying in this current moment. Or it could be a self-compassion statement of, I need to remind myself I'm doing the best I know how to do, and I'm just experiencing betrayal, and then choosing to go do some self-care. So as you work with your nervous system, as you work in getting out of your stories, you're going to notice that the triggers are going to decrease, especially when you're in relationship with your betraying partner. And when we have triggers lessen, when we have more emotional regulation, then connection stays stronger. So the addict partner disconnects usually due to shame. And with shame, that moves them into things like fear and blame and disconnection. Because shame, the core message of shame is that I'm defective and I am unworthy of love and connection. And so when a betraying partner has maybe the betrayed partner come to them and share with them, I have a really big concern. I don't see you going to see your therapist on a regular basis, and that scares me. When their shame kicks in, they believe that they're being labeled with an identity like you are bad, and they don't want to be associated with that. What the betraying partner wants to be seen as is somebody who's putting hard work into their recovery. And so when your partner suggests you spend more time doing it or criticizes how you're doing it, that shame kicks in and it produces 3 really big feelings. It creates fear that you're going to see me in a bad light, fear that you won't believe that I'm actually doing recovery, It moves them into blame. I'm going to blame you and turn it back on you, or I'm going to blame myself that I'm not doing recovery very well, or it's going to cause me to move away. So we have a fight, flight, and freeze response that also takes place when shame comes up. So what do we do when this is happening? How can the betraying partner and the betrayed partner recognize that disconnection is happening? And then what do you do about it? Excuse me, I have allergies. It's that time of year here. So first of all, we need to recognize that anytime we're moving into a trigger, we have to know how that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response shows up in ourselves. So for me, it's going to be I'm going to run away. I have a lot of anxiety that kicks in. I'm going to get out of there. I'm going to become avoidant. Or it might be that I get angry and I get defensive. And then when we recognize when shame is coming up, we need to call it. Or when I'm in my stories, we need to call it. And then we need to move into having a skill set and some tools in our belt. So the first tool I want to talk about is having a trigger plan. Really important, not only for the betrayed partner to know what they're going to do for themselves, but I'm talking about a trigger plan as a couple. So what is really helpful in this case is for the betraying partner to stay really grounded in the moment. We're going to talk about how you do that in just a second. But to call it out in a nice, gentle way and maybe question or get curious and ask, are you triggered right now? Because it appears as if you might be triggered. And then even guiding the betrayed partner into asking them, are you in a story right now? And let them answer and see what's going on for them internally. And then asking, how can I support you? What do you need right now? Do you need some space to work through this? Do you need me to move closer to you and help you co-regulate? And sometimes you can even help co-regulate by doing things like just a hand on an arm. It could even be breathing together or reminding the betrayed partner how to breathe so that you are there for them and you're supporting them in a way that they can recognize what's going on internally and you can be there to help them as they move out of that trigger. Another thing that you need to have is you need to have some type of a shame plan. So if you are the addict partner, you're the betraying partner, then you need to really put on that Teflon suit and you need to just let that shame just bounce off and don't absorb it. So the analogy I always like to use is when you're holding space, right, and you're not absorbing the shame, it's like you're holding a bucket and let everything just go into the bucket or the bowl, and you're just holding that space for the person to share how they're feeling, and you're not a sponge. So you're not just taking it all in. And if you do find yourself in your shame getting triggered, call it out and just say, hey, my shame's getting triggered. Can I take a step back? Can I figure this out? And then can I come back in 15, 20 minutes and can we resume this discussion? So it's really important that when you do step away, that you move into some self-compassion, because we know that self-compassion is the antidote for shame. So the minute I maybe use some of my self-compassion statements, or maybe I have a mantra that I go to, when I repeat that, and it's going to pull me out of my shame and back into this space of self-awareness, self-love, self-appreciation, however you want to call self-compassion. The other thing you can use is communication tools. I really like putting my couples knee to knee, and they do reflective listening. So with reflective listening, what you're doing is you are focusing on your partner. You're looking in their left eye. So you're facing each other, knee to knee, looking in their left eye, and you're listening to what they're telling you, and then you're repeating it back. And that's all you're doing. You're not adding your comments. You're not adding your thoughts or ideas. You're not providing validation or anything like that at that point. But instead, here's what I heard you say. And then you ask if you got it right and if there's anything else. And you keep doing that until you hear everything they need. And then what I love at that point is for the betraying partner to use the AVR principle of empathy, where you acknowledge the pain, you validate the emotion, and then you reassure the betrayed partner that you're there for them or that you're doing your recovery. Whatever it is, the reassurance they need, you provide it to them in that moment. Another tool I like for communication is when you recognize you're in your story, turn to your partner and say, the story I'm telling myself, or the story I'm in right now about this, or what I'm telling myself right now about you is, and share that. When we use that framework, it's really helpful because we can say a lot of things using that framework, and it seems to keep that shame trigger down because I am not saying you're doing this and you are this. Instead, I'm saying, I'm telling myself this about you. Makes a huge difference. And then the last thing that I think is really helpful is regular check-ins. I think if we can communicate in an effective way, and if we can do regular check-ins and provide information, it's going to cause the triggers, right? That trauma brain to kick in and the stories to get online and the shame to get also activated. And so one of the best ones is Fanos. So think about doing a Fanos check-in. And remember, Fanos stands for feelings, so you're going to share an emotion. A stands for an appreciation. N is a need, maybe a need you have from your partner. Ownership for maybe something you did, maybe it was something wrong that needs to be corrected. And then S for a success you had. I've also had my partners come in and couples as we're working. They also add a struggle, success or struggle in that because sometimes the betrayed partner feels like the betraying partner is really vulnerable when they share, hey, I've struggled with this and here's what I'm doing to help me work through this struggle. Here's who I'm turning to. Here's the work I'm doing. And it really helps them see that the betraying partner is really doing their recovery. So, anyway, here's my thoughts that I've had today about when we see disconnection. I typically find it's those two reasons. Again, it's typically that the betrayed partner has gone into their trauma brain and they've gone into this mind state where they're telling themselves a certain type of story. And I'm seeing also that the betraying partner, their shame kicks in and they're getting defensive or they're disconnecting completely. And we know that in this type of recovery work and through the codependence lens, this is all about attachment. And we know that we heal in connection. It's so important that we have that. And as I work with betrayed partners mostly, what I hear time and time again is how important it is for them to feel safe so they can move towards the betraying partner and reestablish healthy connection. So I'm hoping that today I gave you some ideas that will help you with that.
Great stuff as always. A couple things you talked about, like using screen time, and that can be a flight. Um, and was thinking, I've heard again recently more partners that are turning to alcohol or cannabis or whatever substances. Would you put that in the flight category too?
I think I would. I would probably do it, or even in a, that's really good. I would probably put one foot in flight and one foot in freeze, even, depending
Oh,
on
okay.
what it is you're trying to do. Okay?
Okay.
For example, let me explain that. Here's where my brain's thinking. Flight might be I'm trying to avoid something, right? So I'm going to do, maybe I'm having a lot of anxiety. And so if I use alcohol or cannabis, then I minimize that. I can ignore it in a way, right?
Hmm.
I think that in a free state, well, let me go back. I think in a free state, we're doing it to escape, right? And I think in a flight state, we're doing it not to feel, or maybe
Oh,
a
okay.
little of both. I'm trying to figure that out, but I think it can be both. So I'm just saying this off
Okay.
the top of my head. So if anybody
Okay.
out there has any thoughts or ideas on that, but I think it could be both. If I'm turning to it time and time again, so I don't have to feel feelings and I can shut down, then I would say I'm doing it to freeze. If I'm doing it to avoid, right? Because avoidance typically is a flight type of a thing, right? Then so
No, and I asked, and it may not matter, but I think a lot of times it is helpful to identify this is what I do in response to, and because if you're able to, and it may be that enough that this is what I turn to, and that's problematic, but it to me it's also, are there other patterns? Like if I use this, are there other things I'm doing that could be, a similar or compounding as well.
yeah, as in a therapeutic setting and my therapist point of view is I feel like alcohol and cannabis, weed, I feel like when I look at a spectrum of healthy coping skills and tools, they would not be high on that spectrum of effective to me. Or I'm talking healthy
Right.
and effective. Are they effective? Probably. Are they as healthy? No, because I think we can use them as a crutch at times, and we're not working through some of the deeper issues we need to work through because we're avoiding feeling our full feelings. So we have to use that with moderation, right? And we have to use it carefully. My preference is that you're not using it at all, but I know everybody has a different, need.
Okay, so let's continue with that. And I know we've got questions, we'll get to them, but like so it sounds like I'm just kicking the can down the road because I'm not dealing with it now. And could that be the said about any of the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn? Like that like
Oh yeah,
I'm stuck right now and I'm not dealing with it. And so those patterns repeat, but you're never getting to the root of things so that
correct.
you can get through it.
Correct.
Okay, okay,
Correct.
okay.
So it's kind of like this. I use the trauma tree analogy, and I
Hmm.
use it to my clients every time they come in. First session, everybody's like a tree, right? I'm going to look at you like a tree. The leaves and the branches are the situations you're in and your symptoms. So it's include your behaviors, what you're doing, right? So, and then I'm looking at the trunk of the tree, which is what is that belief you have about yourself, right? That is going to intensify or make the situations or the behaviors, right, more intense and problematic. So then I've got to look at what's at the root of the tree, right? What's feeding the trunk and then moving into those branches, and that's what we've got to get to. So in betrayal, I've got to eventually get to the trauma. But if I'm up in the leaves and the branches having betrayal trauma symptoms, right, and dealing with a partner who is not in recovery, so I've got repeated betrayal, right, I can't get to the root of it. If I'm up in the leaves and the branches and I'm drinking or I'm using cannabis to numb, right, I can't get to the root of it. And true healing happens when we get to the root of it and we heal the trauma, which then will shift the negative belief. That's that mind state the brain has, right? And then it's going to shift and change the leaves and branches. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I love that. And I just wrote it down. So, and you were talking about relationships, and we do heal in relationships. So, in my signature line on my email, I have Harville Hendricks. It is, we are born in relationships, we are wounded in relationships, and we heal in relationships. That's a paraphrase. I should have looked my own signature line back up, but I was like, it is so important. And one more thing is because you talked about like sitting knee to knee and the reflective listening and things. I unfortunately, and I bet you have to have heard that weaponized of like I have to repeat, I think you're a horrible person, and I'm never going to trust you, and I can't, like whatever, like so. I think if you're going to do those things, there has to be ground rules of what is being shared, so that it isn't just negative dumping that I have to reinforce what you're saying. So yeah,
Boundaries. We have to set
yeah,
talking boundaries, and
yeah.
really, really helpful.
Okay, let's get to questions. My husband grew up with an abusive father and seemed to be a mean, malignant narcissist. His mother was cunning and manipulative. My husband also appeared to be a textbook narcissist. After he was caught cheating, it's as if all the walls came down. That's not to say he's been perfect, but he's been going in the right direction since. Is it possible there were just defense behaviors that were learned from childhood? A true narcissist can't really change, right?
Um, so great question. I just had this kind of come up in one of my sessions this week. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to answer your questions in just a second, but I want to give a little background. I did a webinar a while back on is my addict a narcissist? The interesting thing we see is somebody who is in addiction has high levels of narcissistic behaviors until they're in recovery and they've got that self-awareness, because narcissists have no self-awareness, they have no empathy, among other things. And so I believe that oftentimes when you feel like you're addict partner is got to be a narcissist and they get into recovery, all of a sudden you do see these shifts and changes. So yes, I do believe it's possible that those were just defense mechanisms, most likely his shame, because if he grew up in a home with an abusive father who was a malignant narcissist and a mother who was cunning and manipulative, there's going to be a lot of shame, and it's going to start at a very, very young age. Also, when I'm hiding my addictions, right? And I know I'm going against my value set. I know I'm going against the agreement within the relationship with my partner or my spouse. There is so much shame. So oftentimes we do see that once it's all out in the open, we do see those walls come down like you talk about, and the shame kind of falls away to a degree where they can finally start talking about it and they will shift and change. But again, part of the work in recovery of somebody who's got what I call high levels of narcissistic behaviors is they've got to recognize what those behaviors are as part of their recovery work. So if they're doing a lot of gaslighting, if they're darvoing, which means, they're defending, attacking, reversing victim and offender, they're turning the tables, they've got to recognize how they do that and they've got to stop doing that. If they're minimizing as gaslighting, they've got to learn about that. They've got to recognize, the steps of empathy and start to use it. It's a skill set. And again, this is down the road in recovery. These are the higher learning concepts once we get sobriety under our belt. And now we're doing recovery skills and tools to support sobriety. And then we're starting to do all these things. And the hope is that we will see them shift. We will see that willingness to make change continue. So there's no resistance. And then we see them trying to gain the capacity, meaning the skills and tools like empathy and understanding and validation and things like that, that according to the data, a true narcissist who has been clinically diagnosed as such doesn't have. So those are my thoughts on it.
And true narcissists wouldn't care to, like, they just don't care, so and I really appreciate you putting this in here, because like, wow, what a lot of stuff that was really hard for him to grow up in. And no wonder, I mean, there have been a fair number of addicts I've said, thank goodness you're an addict. That was probably the only thing that saved you through a terrible childhood and growing up. It lets you get to be an adult. It's firing all over the place now. But yeah, but like, that's a terribly toxic environment. But I hear him grabbing onto tools of recovery and going, this is different and I'm all in. And of course he's not going to do it perfectly. Welcome to A, humans, we don't do anything perfectly. And B, like, this is like Debbie just said, it's like we have to learn to do all of this. And we start out in kindergarten. And but if you're seeing progress, that's fantastic. And that would be something that you can continue to lean into for yourself as well. So, okay. This is not exactly a question, it's more of a milestone feedback. My self-image and body image took a huge hit after D-Day. I lost so much hair, weight, and self-esteem, and was even researching plastic surgery because I looked nothing like the women in my SAPA acted out with. I was feeling a ton of shame and self-loathing about my looks. I love your eyeshadow, Debbie, and you reminded me how much fun I used to have with cosmetics. You inspired me to pull out my pink eyeshadow and get dolled up for myself. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing this. And Debbie, you work with partners all the time. How often do you see and plastic surgery? I mean, I hear that,
Mhm.
and partners regretting it because I'm not part plastics or whatever, but they did it for someone else to try to do whatever rather than choosing to do it for themselves. And so there can be regret. But how often do you see? I mean, like, lots.
Well, I see this come up. So this is also kind of comes under the umbrella of partner shame, because partners, again, when I know what my betraying partner either was drawn to as far as their erotic template or what they viewed as in pornography, and it doesn't look a thing like me, right? My shame is going to tell me that somehow I'm not good enough, that I'm defective, or I am broken because I don't look a certain way. So it is common for it to show up in certain ways. If it's not your self image and your body image, it might be even in your behaviors. I've got to be a perfect wife. So, if it's not a perfect body, I've got to be a perfect wife, right? I've got to be the perfect sex partner. I've got to, and it's really driven by the shame. So I'm really glad to hear that this individual, it sounds like you are moving out of that shame and that self loathing and into such a much healthier place. So I want you to know it is common to feel that way. You're not alone. And it's a hard place to be.
It is, and I love, I'm almost saying, send me a pic of you with your pink eyeshadow because I like do it. Make sure you do it. I want you to do it for you. So, and somebody asked about the quote, and I went and pulled it from my signature line. So, um, we are born in relationship, we are wounded in relationship, and we can be healed in relationship. So I was close, but that's from Dr. Harville Hendricks, who did a podcast with Dr. Rob. You can listen to that on sex, love, and addiction. But when I saw that, I was like, that just felt so authentic for me, of knowing that we need that connection. Whatever side of the relationship we're on, I sure couldn't do that by myself. So, okay. The next one is SLA three, so sex love addict, 3 years in recovery, sponsored and sponsor. Good for you. CSAT couples therapy. My wife had a long-term affair with a close friend of mine 20 plus years ago. She disclosed this to me 2 years ago. Which one of us is triggered? Inevitably, the one's betrayal gets triggered too. So one of us gets triggered, the other one gets triggered too. So they're doing that dance. So they're asking, how do we break the cycle and better hold space for each other when feelings, emotions are unregulated? This is complicated, and it's a great question.
Excuse me, it is a great question. I want to, something just came to my mind that I want to address, and we're going to get into, okay, what do you do when you're both triggered? But you mentioned that 2 years ago you found out about something that happened 20 years ago. And one of the things that I find a dynamic I find happen is that for you, even though you found out 2 years ago, you're still dealing with it in the here and now. For you, it is, I've been dealing with this for 2 years. This is still a part of my life in the here and now. For your partner who had the affair 20 years ago, and now they're trying to move past it, they might see this as in the past. And so we have a bit of a difference in viewpoint on this, and it could cause some conflict and disconnection on this. So I'm hoping that your wife recognizes that even in this day today, even though it happened 20 years ago, for you it still comes up in the here and now because you're still working through it. So when one of you gets triggered, the other one's going to get triggered too. Let's reframe it and say you guys at that point are fighting for connection, but you're doing it in a way that is not creating what you want. So you have to both commit to a couple of things. The first thing you've got to commit to is something called a fair fighting agreement or fair fighting rules. So that means that when you're both emotionally regulated, meaning connected to prefrontal cortex, where we've got logic, reasoning, emotional regulation, mood modulation, all those kinds of things, then we're going to sit down and say, when we fight, what are the things that we do that are creating more disconnection? So it might be things like, well, we're having hard conversations before we go to work and as soon as we get home. Okay, so the fair fighting rule is no hard conversations or conflict before work or right after work, right? It might be things like no hard discussions or fighting after 9 p.m. It could be no name calling or shame based language or throwing things or whatever. I'm just adding things. But what do you both need to be doing so that you can stay regulated? So we have to have a set of rules. One of those rules has to be a timeout. The timeout boundary is that if either one of you are no longer connected to here, but you're going into that limbic, and remember that limbic region is emotion driven, And there is no emotional regulation there because it's all about emotions and there's no logic. And our brains say you got to fight it out when you're in that limbic part of your brain, but there is no resolving anything when you're there. So even if you start to see your partner getting dysregulated, you call a pause or a time out to the conversation. I like to say, hey, I need to take a pause. We're getting emotional. Let's just step back and take an hour and let's come back here same time. I mean, in 1 hour, same place, and let's continue this discussion. And then when you leave and do that self care, you're going to also want to maybe sit down and do some journaling. Excuse me. And in that journaling, you might use something like the 4-part talking boundary, where first step is here's what I saw and heard you say, right? Here's the stories I went into. Here's the feeling I have about it, the emotions that came up. And here's number 4 step, here's what I need, right? Or here's my boundary moving forward. It is such a great way to slow it down because your limbic brains, both of you, your limbic brains are saying, fight it, fight it, fight it, fight it out. And so it's not going to work. So the way to break the cycle is, first of all, you've got to have, I hope you're in couples therapy too, and get a really good couples therapist who can help you.
CSAT couple and couples therapy. So
Right. So
yes,
you just
yeah.
yes, and I'm sure you've worked on that in there, but maybe even using them as an accountability person so you guys come up with your plan and present it, and then you're also being accountable every time you go into couples session as to whether or not you're holding to it. And if you're struggling with it, then your therapist is there to help you with what's getting in the way. But it's really, really important because the interesting thing is when we're limbic, oftentimes we don't remember what we say or what we do. However, the other person always remembers because they're in a heightened state. And so we can do a lot of damage. And I know a lot of people really struggle when they're both limbic in walking away from it or somebody walking away. It feels like abandonment to them, which kind of goes back to probably earlier issues that they've had in their life and earlier abandonment wounding that's taken place. So we have to recognize that the reason we're doing this is because we don't want to create any more disconnection. So that's really, really important.
And I was saying, well, first of all, and I'm sorry it was with your friend. Like I always find that when it's somebody friend, relative, etc., it's kind of well, it's not kind of, it's a double betrayal. And I was sitting here thinking, you guys have so much more in common, than not. You guys both have experienced this. But I suspect, and I'm not there, but I suspect it's like, and you did this to me, and do, and rather than going, wow, look how we both have been impacted, and I can feel how how my betrayal has hurt you, and I can see how, I mean, like it's one of those, if you can go to that place instead of getting caught up in the we're both triggered, like I mean, you neither one, Dr. Eddie quotes Dr. Gabor Mate, you can't make what happened unhappen. Again, paraphrase because I never can remember a quote completely, but it's what you do today that causes the trauma and re-traumatizes. So the two of you, I love have a fair fighting contract. Have a like these are topics that we will only talk about in front of our couples therapist because we need a higher level of help in order to get through this because we're getting stuck. You know, recognizing that when the other person is triggered, self-soothing, what can I do, self-care so that I can take care of myself so that I can show up, and you guys probably start to recognize, like I'm starting to go, like if you can catch it here instead of when it's a full blown, I see you, I can feel this with me. I think we need to call a timeout so that we're, not letting it go. Yeah, painful, on both sides. And I can't tell you how many couples that I know that have had these dynamics that have found healing. I mean, you can have greater level because, it probably neither of you were doing it intentionally to hurt the other person. This is what has happened, and here's where you are now. So keep working on it. I'm glad you've got good support. You're doing good things, and it's a process. You guys can get through it.
And join the boundary group. The boundary group
Yes.
gives you so many ideas.
Yeah.
and help you understand what's going on and help you. I mean, so many boundary formats and so many ideas and the application. So, just a thought.
Yes. And so then we were talking about alcohol, and this person says, sometimes alcohol is used to add fuel to the fight fire.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, it's going to lower inhibitions, right? And so, I agree. It can do that as well. So, I guess you can use alcohol as a fight, flight, or freeze.
Yeah. Yeah.
Respect.
I, I often think, what is the goal? I mean, what is the goal? Like you got, you're here you are, you've been through painful things. What is the goal? And if the goal is how do we, we want to be together or not, but I want to heal regardless of what that other person is doing. How do I best do that? I love that you talked about again, your tribe of people, she experienced this long before there was all of these resources. So a lot of what Debbie is sharing, she's learned on her own journey, but also like with the many, many clients. And so if the goal is I want to heal, regardless of what has happened, there are ways to do that. So, and if alcohol is actually helping, if at the end of that, like you go, wow, that really made a positive difference. Great. If there are other ways, like tapping. I actually use the stop it. I forgot that it was do it 7 times, so I thought it was like 30 seconds or 45 seconds or whatever. So I just did it a whole. I probably had dents in my head, but it absolutely worked because I didn't remember. I don't even remember what it was that I was looping. And then during the night, because I'm traveling and surgery for kiddo. But I woke up and I had this like anxious moment and I was like, everything is fine, but I wasn't calming down. So I like 4-7-8 breathing, and I did my 4-7-8 breathing, and I think I went right back to sleep, so it's like all those things really work, and so like, like just finding what worked for you, and just believing, like I believe Debbie told me, stop, it's going to work. And it did. So
Yes.
oh, when my husband blames me for drinking, what is he really saying?
Well, here's what I would
That's different. Yeah.
explore that as I would go right to the shame. Because
Yeah.
remember, one of the phrases I use oftentimes is when there's blame, there's shame. And so, I'm not sure the context of when he blames you. Is it when you're bringing it to his attention? Then I could see where that could be something that would trigger his shame. I know that sometimes, people can blame you for, causing them to do something. But the ultimate right truth is that nobody can make you do anything. It's a choice. And I'm very much a believer in, we choose to do certain things. And so we have to be accountable for those choices. And it's unfortunate. It sounds to me like that could be a little bit of a gaslighting. And so one of the boundary tools I would use is what I call the broken record or the however boundary, which is I understand that you blame me for your drinking. However, right? Your drinking is a choice you're making and it has nothing to do with me. And maybe that's what you just keep, and you keep repeating that second part. Yes, I know that you blame me for your drinking. However, right? Your drinking is a choice and it has nothing to do with me. And then after about the third time, you say, well, at this point, we're going to have to agree to disagree. And then you walk away and no longer engage. So, and in those times when things are really, calm, can you even go to them and say, moving forward, if we're having a conversation and you blame me for your drinking, I am going to put an end to that conversation in that moment and step away and go do some self care. And then that's what you're going to do moving forward is when they bring it up, you're going to call that. And this one is going to be an end to the conversation, not a timeout and come back, but an end to the conversation and then go do self care.
This is why the healthy boundaries for group that starts next week would be amazing for so many people. I'm actually pulling the specific link for that one and putting it in the chat right now. But yeah, I was like, yeah, that's definitely gaslighting. And unless, I mean, it could be happening where you're tying him down and holding his mouth open and pouring the alcohol down his mouth, then you may have something to do with it. But if that's not happening, it's probably not, then it's absolutely a choice. And And every addict wants to blame someone else, for the choices. That's why recovery is about taking accountability. I am responsible for my actions. Even if I'm under the influence of something, a substance or a behavior, I am still responsible for my behaviors. And I need to look at how my behaviors, even when I was under the influence of whatever, have negatively impacted not just me, but everybody else in my wake. That's what recovery is about. So this sounds like, either an addict holding on to, I don't want to quit. I want to keep doing it and I can keep blaming you. We have to blame everyone else. Oh my goodness, if we had to look at our behaviors when we're in active addiction, we'd stop, but we don't want to. So we're hanging on to that. So don't buy his lies. That's my, that's his, I love Deb. Yeah. Start doing that. And I feel for partners when an addict partner is doing all that blaming, because those negative messages really can get caught up in, like the stuff Debbie was like. I'm telling myself that I'm not okay. Like that other person is telling me I'm not okay. And that's just not true. So learning self-care, self-love, healthy boundaries is a really good help. So if you haven't signed up for that, and the Betrayed Partner work group started this week, and if, that is still an option. If you having missed one week, that is not a big deal. So you can email tami@seekingintegrity.com if you want to join that Angela experiment. If you're new to this journey, that can be a good place to start. But healthy boundaries, including internal boundaries, like I will not betray myself regardless of what that person does or doesn't do. Game changer. Like you can heal. You can heal. So okay, we are out of time. So yeah, thank you so much. And join us again. Matt Wheeler will be here next week, but join again. Lots of things to keep watching the calendar, because I do update that. And with the holidays coming up this month and next month, there are some changes. So, and this recording will be posted to our website with a whole bunch of other ones. So check those out as well. Thanks, Debbie. Thanks, everyone. Bye.